Often companies in the commercial and industrial space don't have budget for non-core assets. What we do is we come in and we fund all of the capital expense upfront for installation and for operation and maintenance of any of the measures we install. Our clients only see a lower energy bill on day one. So it's a win-win for both.
Net zero. What is one assumption about net zero that you may or may not believe is fundamentally flawed?
I think net zero is not necessarily just an environmental strategy. It's an economic restructuring. The energy transition requires different capital allocation. So it's not only about CSR initiatives, it's about how we reallocate capital accordingly. And the question is not how to do that to achieve net zero, is how much capital we're going to spend if we don't work towards sustainability initiative.
Yeah.
When boards are evaluating climate solutions, it's not a question of do we decarbonize, it's a question of what if we don't decarbonize, what happens to our balance sheet if we don't decarbonize. And more often than not, the sustainable solution is as cost competitive as a conventional solution. I think the energy transition will not slow down for lack of demand, and it will not slow down because the economics don't work. We've shown already that the economics are even better than conventional energy. So I can imagine there are three possible reasons why there might be some slowdown. One is indeed this sort of
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at Season 2 for AERZENtalks. I'm Adrienne Doolan, as you probably are aware, the Managing Director for the Clean Energy Business Council, of which Positive Zero are members. So we're delighted to have that. Energy transition, it's inevitable, but it needs to be structured and governed. And I think this is where the role that you play comes in. So I'm delighted to be joined by Alissa King, who is the General Counsel and Board Member at Positive Zero, which is a platform bringing and building decarbonization as a service across the energy. So very, very welcome. Thank you very much. Would you like to give us a brief explanation of what Positive Zero is doing?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be here. Positive Zero, we are trying to help our clients reduce their carbon emissions and also reduce their operating costs. We aim to be a one-stop shop for our clients' decarbonization needs. They say that the cleanest energy is the energy that isn't produced in the first place. And so on the one hand, we're trying to reduce the energy demand that our clients have, and on the other hand, make the energy supply greener.
So you're actually doing, I think, a really important service, actually, because you're not you're actually giving companies the opportunity, and smaller companies who can't afford to introduce solar, etc., and you're giving them the opportunity to do that, right, in your operations.
We're backed by BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, and we offer fully financed solutions. Often companies in the commercial and industrial space don't have budget for non-core assets. What we do is we come in and we fund all of the capital expense upfront for installation and for operation and maintenance of any of the measures we install. And our clients only see a lower energy bill on day one. So it's a win-win for both sides.
Because then we see a lowering in carbon. So it's and this is where I suppose sustainability has to show a financial value in order for it to be adopted, right? It's otherwise it gets so difficult. Is distributed energy now a financial asset in its own right?
Distributed energy has certainly evolved into a financial asset. And it's obviously very appealing for a number of institutional investors. That's why BlackRock has invested in Positive Zero. Investors are looking for predictable cash flow and minimal risk. You don't get that on single projects, but you do get that when you aggregate a number of small projects into a bigger portfolio like we have with our 300 megawatts of solar in the region. And when you aggregate into a bigger portfolio, when you have long-term offtake arrangements or power purchase agreements, when you have creditworthy off-takers, you have minimal risk. And so you have predictability and stability of cash flow.
No, that's really, and I think that's, I mean, with positive zero, especially now with the federal law that was introduced in 2025, which will now hopefully come into absolute mandation in May of this year. I mean, how many companies know that they can avail of what you guys are doing? How do you actually get the word out there?
We have benefited quite a lot from channel partners and from big client accounts. Some of our biggest client accounts are DP World, Lulu, Landmark, and we're trying to, as I said, be a one-stop shop for decarbonization needs. So reducing the energy demand through energy efficiency measures or optimization of data, all the way to installing solar on their rooftop to make their energy supply greener, to managing their mobility needs and fleet electrification.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys, I mean, you're so lucky. I know from the, previous working with impact SMEs here in the market, trying to introduce solar and residential, it's been very difficult for them. So when you've got more industrialized solutions, then it's great. But then organizations like this can actually partner with larger corporates, because I think nowadays partnerships and collaborations are the only way forward that we can actually, get on the road to net zero. I think that's really interesting. So how do boards evaluate climate investments differently today than they did 5 years ago? I mean, have you seen big changes?
Yes. I mean, I can tell you that in the span of my career, when I started as a junior associate lawyer, my first solar energy deal was 15 years ago in the US, and it only got off the ground because of US government subsidies. The price at the utility scale per kilowatt hour was around 37 cents per kilowatt hour. Fast forward to today, it's around 1 cent per kilowatt hour at the utility scale. So the unit economics make a lot more sense now. The trajectory has been huge. And so when boards are evaluating climate solutions, it's not a question of do we decarbonize? It's a question of what if we don't decarbonize? What happens to our balance sheet if we don't decarbonize? And more often than not, the sustainable solution is as cost competitive as a conventional solution.
Yeah, and so I think how do you structure long-term agreements and making them bankable? But I think you've already touched on that by showing the OpEx and the way you organize. So that you're showing the bankable strategy, and it's probably hence you have BlackRock investing in your company as well. On regulations, do you think that regulators are keeping up with the innovations and with what's happening now? Are there enough regulations in the country currently?
Well, the regulators have not been shy about their ambition. I mean, following the Paris Agreement, there have been so many policy initiatives that are very ambitious, and renewable energy targets that are very ambitious in the region. And the regulations that have followed have been generally very favorable. One example is the net metering scheme with Dubai Shams regulation in Dubai. Why is that favorable? Because if clients produce more energy than they can consume, they get a 1-for-1 credit from the grid. So the regulations have been favorable, but they have not kept pace with innovation. The technological innovation, the commercial solutions have gone a lot faster than the regulations. And that creates first mover advantage in the market. But there's also regulatory uncertainty. And of course, capital and investors like certainty.
Yes, yeah.
And there's quite a lot of regulatory dynamism and difference between different jurisdictions, even within the UAE, for example.
Yeah, and I suppose that's definitely where the benefits of being a part of the CEBC as well, then, because we get to drive regulatory change as well, which is really important. I'm supportive of all businesses within our network. We're going to take a change now, but we've been talking about all this morning, nothing but women and responsible leadership, and how do we get more women into STEM? And I know you've talked a lot about this because it's a really important aspect to get more women on board. And you just made a comment earlier about being the only woman. That was really interesting.
It's an important question, so thank you for asking it. I think the energy transition is very capital intensive, and influence lies where capital decisions are made, where investment decisions are made. And so we need more women on boards and in investment committees. I think a lot of women in STEM have the technical capability, but not necessarily the financial or commercial acumen. And so we need to have more focus, I think, on secondments or rotations through investment arms, through treasury departments, I think, to help create early exposure and confidence in women. I also think that mentorship is important. I'm a mentor with Mazdar's Wiser program.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love doing this. But I think even more important than mentorship, it's sponsorship. And by that, I mean sponsors using their own political capital to open doors for women, to talk about them when they're not in the room, to help put them in more impactful roles.
Yeah.
And I personally also believe in gender-based performance metrics.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? But I mean, you still have to, as like, let's say, as leaders of organizations, you still have to have a look and see that you need to get that gender balance. And do you have that? Is that on the board within your own organization?
Well, 20% of our board is female. That's me. But no, I think generally speaking, companies need to be more proactive about gender metrics. Should be thinking about that not only sort of more broadly in the company, but also at the decision-making level and with investment committees.
Yeah, because I mean, as men and women, we both bring in different perspectives on how things can go, and it can be only of benefit for an organization to have both voices heard, right? And both.
Well, there
aspects.
are behavioral studies that suggest that women have less overconfidence bias in terms of risk decision making in financial risk.
Oh yes, definitely.
So it's not that women are more risk averse, but they may be more
cautious
or risk aware.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they say that women ask for less loans, less credit, that a man will just push forward, and he has no problem in asking for that. And we're just more cautious. But that's just how you operate differently. So that can bring a great balance into an organization as well.
Well, also diversity just helps decision making. I mean, there have been many studies that have shown that.
Yeah, definitely. Is with the geopolitics that's going on at the moment, let's not mention countries' names or otherwise, but is it slowing down the global energy transition? Is that going to start slowing down with what's happening? I mean, we've had huge pullbacks on climate, and there's a lot of scrambling going on everywhere. So is it going to damage the energy transition?
Well, I think the energy transition will not slow down for lack of demand, and it will not slow down because the economics don't work. We've shown already that the economics are even better than conventional energy. So I can imagine there are three possible reasons why there might be some slowdown. One is indeed this sort of regulatory volatility.
Yeah.
Investors love stability and are guided by regulation, regulatory stability. I think there's also capital constraints, because as the energy transition is so capital intensive, if there's tightening of liquidity or higher interest rates, that could potentially put some constraints on pipelines.
That's where organizations such as yours will be of vital importance. So I think it's really wonderful to see the kind of investment that's being put in. Because A, it's bankability, so it makes financial sense, but B, it makes great sense on the whole lowering of emissions and decarbonization. So it's a win.
The whole idea is that it's a win-win for our customers.
Yeah,
they lower their operating costs, they also lower their emissions, and we enter into long-term offtake arrangements, which give us the return that's required to be backed by BlackRock.
Yes, which is great. Do you see now, because I was reading yesterday regarding the EU now, and I think it's quite disappointing the way they've sort of, not backtracked, but they're, I can't think of the word now I'm looking for, but for the emissions now. So it used to be like 250 employees in a company. Now it's gone up to 1,000. And so there seems to be almost a lot of backtracking. I think that's being done because of the geopolitical situation. I think companies already on the journey in Europe are just going to continue anyway because they've set themselves up that way to go that way. Do you think that will have an effect on the GCC market? Or will we just continue to...
I don't think so.
No.
The GCC market has weathered so many other storms compared to, and I think the GCC leaders are visionary and also understand that it makes good investment sense.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, when we look at this, all from a climate science point of view, not the bankability, but the actual climate science, it has to make sense because this region is set to warm up faster than other regions. So we can look to the US, we can look to the EU, we can, say, okay, this is good initiative, but we need to really look at what's best for our environment, what works best for, a more than 50-degree environment, because that's what we're going to be looking at. So still staying on the energy transition, and then this is a really hopeful question, 10 years from now, which is, where are we, 2035 then, 2036? Where do you see the energy transition? Do you think there will be huge changes?
I think there will be great decentralization of production. So the distributed energy market that we operate in will become much bigger and comparable with probably outpace the utility scale market. I think, though, with decentralization of production, you will get much more centralization of control, of data, and you'll need AI and other control mechanisms to be able to manage vast ecosystems of distributed production.
Yeah. So decentralization carries a lot of hope for regions where they're already struggling with electricity when they're in darkness. I was watching a whole program last week in India and in Kenya, actually, in an area where they've no light, so the children can't study in the evenings, and women are afraid because of the dark. So decentralizing of the grids will be amazing for areas that haven't had electricity.
But even in much wealthier countries, traditional grids have been built around centralized generation. When you add in renewable power, for example, you also have intermittency. You also have two-way flow. We have different tariffs at different times. So the grid management has become much more complicated than when the grids were built. And so even for countries like the UAE, you need decentralized, distributed energy production to be able to balance out or to be able to defer expensive infrastructure updates to the grid and grid maintenance.
So with that, do you think then other players will come into the market alongside the DEWAs, the FEWAs, the CEWAs? Will other players need to come into the market then to assist with this?
Yes, and I think there'll be a lot of AI-related energy management and optimization that'll be required in addition to the physical infrastructure.
Yeah, I spoke with a company recently who are wanting to come into the fold of the CEBC, and they had because there's there's a lot of mismanagement of the grid as well. And they had a fantastic AI solution that gives, full-time, management of what's happening with the grid. So you know exactly if there's going to be a falling out or what, And I was amazed that it kind of wasn't in there from the beginning. But, this grid efficiency is also super important as well going forward. I have a good
We may
question.
also need regulatory updates, by the way, to help with the grid management or to permit wheeling, for example. Production in one area, wheeling to another area for use and consumption in a different place. Or I think with data centers coming online, especially, there's so much energy need. There'll need to be regulatory changes to accommodate the energy production on site that's required.
Yeah, and as well then the whole sort of, climate aspect of that with the data centers needing the cooling, the amount of water that's being used and energy, etc. So that also has to be governed and managed in a climate related way, because there's no point in having AI tech for for energy reduction and decarbonization, where on the other hand, it's actually consuming more and emitting more CO2. So I think these are all, it's always win-win, right? It's always one or the other. We can never seem to win this one. Net zero. What is one assumption about net zero that you may or may not believe is fundamentally flawed?
I think net zero is not necessarily just an environmental strategy. It's an economic restructuring. The energy transition requires different capital allocation. So it's not only about CSR initiatives, it's about how we reallocate capital accordingly. And the question is not how to do that to achieve net zero, is what's going to happen if we don't achieve, how much capital we're going to spend if we don't work towards sustainability initiative.
Yeah. I think there was a recent report from Bloomberg I was reading that we've already spent lost $17 trillion because we haven't mitigated. And this is just continuing to rise as well as our emissions are. So we really need to focus on organizations such as we have, then, yourselves and within the CEBC are just so important for driving forward the change on renewables as well. Board level, where sustainability and quarterly reports collide, which one wins? Please say sustainability.
Well, I think it's a fallacy to think that they have to be in conflict. The mission of Positive Zero is, in fact, to marry the dual goals of improving sustainability and improving revenue or lowering costs. So I think we don't need to think about them in conflict. And there are many initiatives, including through Positive Zero, I'm sure through other members of CEBC, where those two goals can exist in harmony.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you. And I think the more women that we will bring in onto the boards, I think this, that will kind of change, because a lot of women being naturally nurturing, we're really trashing men on these podcasts today, but that's not the intention. But it's, you bring in emotional intelligence, you bring in sort of a different aspect, so that you make sustainability at the heart, I think, of everything we do, which at the end of the day, this is now the way the world is and the science is going. We can't just look at bankability anyway. It's very important that we look at all aspects. Innovation moving faster than regulations. I think we've kind of touched upon that one. But I'm very interested with your organization being so supported by BlackRock, because I've seen, not just particularly BlackRock, but just, being invested into, because is that just because it is so bankable and scalable? What about smaller companies that have, great tech, great innovation, but just, finding it really difficult for financing and stuff? Are you willing to have partnerships with smaller companies like this? Can they be brought in to work together?
You bring up the important question of bankability versus innovation. Investors like BlackRock are looking for the predictable, stable returns. We can't innovate in the contractual structure that we require in terms of the take or pay model, the compensation on termination, the general risk allocation. We can innovate when it comes to delivery, when it comes to technology that we use. And we are technology agnostic, by the way.
Yeah.
In terms of data management and performance management, that's where innovation can come in. And that's where partnerships with smaller companies who are working on innovative solutions might be very beneficial, mutually beneficial.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing with the, startups. They're usually coming now, especially now with incredible tech solutions. So it's really important, I think, that they get the support that are necessary. So many of them fail along the way with great intentions, but due to lack of finance. I think that's really important. I'm not going to harp on the fact that women don't get as much investment, but we talked about that earlier, that at least that's changing. One final question for you. If you had one wish, and I'm only giving you the genie from the teapot, one wish, what would you like to see going forward for the future?
Personally, I want to see more women in the room, more women on boards, more decision makers.
Yeah, and I'm very honored to be able to do these podcasts with women only, because it's just so wonderful to see women working in so many different fields. And hopefully it can be very inspiring for young women watching us. But yeah, I'm delighted that you had that one wish. That's great. Alissa, thank you so much for being with us. And really love your insights, and I look forward to working further with you within the CEBC. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your work,
Thank
and
you.
thanks for being here.